it was a real labor of love. It's all hand-drawn 2D animation. It's about 17,000 hand-drawn frames. Animation is such a tactile experience and really helps work on, I don't know, your delayed gratification abilities. I have such distinct memories of that first year of really breaking the storyboard and the animatic, of numerous times a week, getting up at 4 a.m. and working from like 4 to 8. And I would sit at my desk where I am right now, and I would watch the sun come up as we were working. And by 8 a.m., we'd be done for the day. And it was kind of this fantastic feeling of accomplishment. I remember going to pick up my badge the day before my screening, and I wandered. I'm sure I wasn't like I went through the back of the building. I don't know. I thought I was turned around, and I ended up wandering into this conference room where Justine Bateman and the head of the festival and like all the other programmers were sitting. And I was like, "Is this where I get my badge?" And they said, "No, that's in the front of the building." But then they went, "Wait, what film do you have?" And I said, "Vibrantea." And their head of the festival said, "Oh my gosh, we loved your film so much. It moved us." He said, "The second we saw it, we said, this has to be in the festival."
Hi Emerson, thanks for jumping on. It's an absolute pleasure. The last time I had a good chat with you, it was early in this year, and Vibrantea, your short film, was in its infancy on the festival circuit. And now actually we're now coming into autumn, so the passage of time has come about, and I'd really love to hear what's going on. But before that, most of all, how are you doing, Emerson? What have you been up to lately?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It feels very full circle to have talked for the first time at the beginning of Vibrantea's festival journey. And here we are, as you said, in the autumn, wrapping up its festival run. Feels very cyclical. And I'm doing well. It's a not too autumnal day in Los Angeles today, but I'm starting to feel those seasons coming in. It's my favorite time of year, so I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for taking the time.
No, it's absolutely great. So, as you're saying, Vibrantea is coming towards the end of its festival circuit. So, if anything, before that, well, for some of our viewers who are new onto it, they may not know what Vibrantea is. So, could you tell us a bit about it?
Yes, absolutely. Vibrantea is an animated short film that I wrote and directed, and I started working on it. It was a real labor of love. It's all hand-drawn 2D animation. It's about 17,000 hand-drawn frames. So yeah, it was really quite a long process from its inception of when I wrote the script to actually having the finished product that we were submitting to festivals. I started working on it around 2021. Really in earnest, started in on the animation with my animator, Aramsta Chavari, who's an amazing animator, around 2022. And then it took us about 2.5 years to complete the actual physical animation, from the storyboards and the animatics, to getting our composer involved, who did a beautiful job, and then eventually our assistant animators and sound designers. And then we premiered at the Manchester Film Festival in 2025, just back in March. And we actually won Best Animated Short at that festival, which was very fun. And it's so funny. I feel like with these things, when something takes 2.5 years, you really can't be doing it for the 10-minute or 11-minute, in the case of my film, screening at the festival. You're doing it for all of the days of showing up for the actual process of creating a project like that. And I think animation is such a tactile experience and really helps work on, I don't know, your delayed gratification abilities. And it's been a beautiful process. And obviously it's lovely to get to see it on a big screen and have people respond to it and enjoy it. And I'm really excited to get to release it publicly soon. So yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, animation, I've been lucky as a producer to only have done a few animation projects, and I find that coming from a kind of more like a in real life film background, show with a camera crew and all that,
Yeah.
you're limited by realism, okay, unless you do a lot of VFX and so on and so forth. But with animation, it's like writing a novel. The possibilities are unlimited. So did you find that quite freeing as a director?
Well, you put it so beautifully. I do think, I write both live action and animation as a screenwriter. But the first feature I ever wrote was an animated feature. And for that exact reason, I think, in college, I didn't study screenwriting. I didn't go to film school, but I studied poetry and education. And I think a lot like poetry, animation is obviously all film is an image driven medium, but your ability to deal in symbols and themes and in this really heightened, often fantastical world that I think you can have a lot more freedom and play in. And also, I think ask an audience to really come with you on a journey that maybe wouldn't buy into as easily were it live action. Um, so when I wrote Vibrantea, I wrote it partially because I wanted to direct an animated feature and really understand how that worked one day. So I said, okay, let me start with a short, and see the inner workings of that, not just from the writing side, but from the directing side. And it became very clear that animation was going to be the right vehicle to tell this story. It doesn't actually exist in a Vibrancy doesn't exist in a fantastical world. It exists in a kind of hybrid imagined version of a if New York met London maybe or met Paris. I think partially because my animator is based in Madrid and I lived in New York for a long time as a younger child. So we were kind of marrying those two aesthetics. But it follows all human characters. There aren't any magical talking animals or anything. There's actually no dialogue at all. Um, so bear with me on that. But it is really a story about the, I think the characters really stand for symbols of feeling disenchanted in your life, feeling like you've kind of lost the spark of color and wonder, and then rediscovering that wonder ultimately through human connection. And I played a lot with the use of color in how we illustrate our protagonist Lynn's journey through this kind of disillusionment to ultimately rediscovering wonder. And I think animation just it worked so well, one in that way from the black and white to color movement, but also I really wanted to celebrate the hands of the artists who made it. My animator, Aronsta Chavari, but also all of our incredible assistant animators who came on board later to help with finishing frames and moving between key frames of animation. And I think if when you watch it, you really can tell it's hand drawn. There's certain moments where someone's eye maybe isn't in the exact perfect place, and I love those moments of seeing the like a painting or the tactile hands of the humans that go into creating this moving piece of art. So yeah, I'm a big animation nerd. I love it.
Yeah, when I was watching Vibrancy, I was blown away by the way of your creative direction, and you've got really interesting creative direction in terms of the color and the colorless moments. Could you let kind of viewers who may have not who may not know about Vibrancy, what is the story and that narrative journey you were mentioning of your character that you were talking about?
Yes, so the story follows Lynn, who is a kind of disillusioned woman who has aged out of her passion as a ballerina and is now working what she maybe views as a sort of dead end job as a diner waitress. And she's very preoccupied in her own melancholy around the world, which we see reflected in gray tones of the city that she lives in. And when a new shop opens up across the street from her diner, run by this very vivacious, kind of joyous woman, Tanya. It's a tea shop across the street. It piques Lynn's interest, and she goes over and tries a tea sample, which acts as a portal into accessing memories in Lynn's life from the past when she felt like her life was really colorful. And At first, we think that these memories are connected to her past in dance, and maybe it's what her passion for dance was bringing her life color. But ultimately, she comes to realize through a series of these tea induced flashback encounters that the real power in those memories was the connection that she had with the people around her. And as soon as she unlocks that key, she starts seeing, really seeing, and acknowledging the people around her in her present moment in her life. And suddenly her world starts to have color come back into it, not just color from memories in the past, but color in her actual present moment. And it, to me, it's a message of, we can find meaning and beauty in any time of our life or anything that we are doing when we're able to really acknowledge the people around us and the human connection that makes that so special.
That's so wonderful to hear that. When I was watching the story, unfortunately, I've never been a ballerina. I don't think I have the body for it. But
Neither have I.
but I was very moved by the character, the direction of the characters, of where they're going, and as you were saying about the use of colour, I was really blown away by how you approached it as a director. So I'm really curious to know what inspired you as a director to make Vibrantea in that beautiful way, or was it yourself something deep down that I had to explore it in this way?
I mean, in terms of the act, just the general theme of black and white going into color, I mean, there are of course really iconic films that I think do this really well. I'm thinking of The Wizard of Oz. She starts in her black and white world and then she goes to Oz and she's in a world of color. I also thought, again, to the poetry of it, thematically having a gray existence where we're not really seeing what is around us and we feel mired in the things that we've lost, and the weight of those things. It just made sense to me to have that type of grief, and melancholy be depicted in black and white. And then I thought, oh gosh, isn't this going to be such a wonderful relief to watch color come back into this world? And I'm a big believer that our perception really is our reality, the way that we see the world around us. And I'm kind of fascinated by the fact that everyone is seeing the world differently. I'm never going to see the world through your eyes in the way that you're seeing it, even if we can agree on common things, which, thank goodness that we can, or else how would we get anything done? Um, but I, I like the idea that this world could be existing in color for all the characters in it all the time, but we are seeing it through Lynn's eyes. And she's not able to see that color until she, learns what she learns and starts accessing that sense of joy and wonder again. In terms of the actual shots, I was really influenced by a lot of black and white photography from the 50s and 60s. We looked at a lot, my animator and I looked at a lot of black and white photography images and how the use of light, um, for how we did the shadows, because it's interesting when you're working in a black and white space, you don't want it to feel two dimensional, although obviously it's 2D animation. But so we worked a lot with shadows and light sources, and actually the one source of color that is in the whole film is anytime you see a light, like an electric light or a street lamp, we colored that in a kind of washed golden yellow. So that brings a little bit of color in, even in the black and white moments. And we were really influenced by photography for that. And then in terms of bringing in the color, we looked at a lot of oil paintings. And I am lucky to have a lot of friends who are fantastic painters. One of my good friends, Kate Pincus Whitney, works a lot with these fantastic oils and colors. And so I looked at a lot of her color palettes to think about how we wanted to introduce color again. And that was kind of that journey.
Wonderful, yeah. Uh, the times I've been blessed to direct projects, the one thing I love is just going out and finding references, inspiration, be it from absolutely anywhere and everywhere. Not just looking at old films, films from the past or recent films that have just come out, but to go and, like you say, look at photography that's not even relevant but just to find that influence somewhere and that find that spark. And it's interesting to hear, earlier you were mentioning you're working with an animator in Madrid. You're based out on the West Coast, Los Angeles. Well, how did you assemble that team? It's an interesting geographic. Obviously, we're in the era of work from home, remote. So it's interesting. I'm really curious to know about how you assembled the team for Vibrantea.
Yeah, I had written the script and I said, okay, no, I want to direct this and I want to find an animator who is kind of game in the way that this is obviously a low budget independent. It's going to take a long time. I have a particular vision for it. I think a lot of people I knew who were working in animation either had like full-time jobs and had no time to put into working on a project like that, or were working really in the 3D animation space. And I knew that as much as I love that type of animation also, I knew that I wanted this to feel a bit more tactile and kind of old fashioned in its approach. So I already had a pretty specific visual language that I wanted to find someone who aligned with. And that my friend actually on Instagram, of all places, my friend said, hey, you should look at this artist, Aransta Chavari's Instagram. She had done a 2D animated music video. And my friend had seen it and really liked it and sent me her Instagram. And I looked at some of her drawings and that music video. And I liked her style a lot. We're around the same age. And I slid into her DMs and I said, hey, I love your art. I wrote this short. I'm hoping to make it. Would you have any interest in collaborating? And I sent her the script and we got on a Zoom, or I might have been a FaceTime actually. And she said to me, at the time that I'd sent her the script, she was actually living in Canada and she was working kind of more corporate 3D, like commercial animation job that she wasn't feeling super passionate about. And so she said the theme of the story really connected with her. And kind of, I feel like so often in film, it's the right story and the person being at the right point in their life to hear that story. And then that is how you find a connection. And she told me, she said, we're going to have to wait a little bit because she was moving. She'd finished school, animation school in Canada, and she was moving to Madrid. She's from Venezuela originally. And she said, so I have to get some things sorted out in Madrid. But once I'm settled there, I'm like, then let's see how we can start this process. And so I kind of kept reaching out like every month or so. And about 6 months later, she was settled in Madrid. We said, okay, let's do this. We worked out our budget and everything. And all of our meetings, everything, through the entire 2.5 year animation process was all on Zoom. Actually, it was on the video call on Discord because we did a lot of communication through different channels on Discord. And I would get up like at 4 in the morning LA time because what worked with her schedule of when she was getting an MFA in Madrid, when she had time, and that was just kind of how we would make it work. And I have such distinct memories of that first year of really breaking the storyboard and the animatic, of numerous times a week, getting up at 4 a.m. and working from like 4 to 8. And I would sit at my desk where I am right now, and I would watch the sun come up as we were working. And by 8 a.m., we'd be done for the day. And it was kind of this fantastic feeling of accomplishment of like, oh my gosh, it's 8 a.m. The day's just starting, and we've done all of this beautiful work. And yeah, so it was all remote. I really, God bless Aransta that she understands my like crazy stick figure drawings and scribbled long descriptions of what's happening in each shot of the film as we were storyboarding. I pulled a lot from, actually talking about references, from live action films in terms of character movement. A few that are really coming to mind was a lot of like facial expressions in Greta Gerwig's Little Women, as well as a lot of like the walking kind of tracking shots in Blue is the Warmest Color, and some other walking shots from Moonstruck and from Singing in the Rain. And so I would sometimes, I would find on YouTube or whatever, like honestly, I mean, 5 second clip, and I would go, okay, from this second to this second, like the way this character turns their face or like moves their arm, this is the kind of movement I'm imagining within this frame in this shot. And I think that's something really interesting when you are working in animation. You know, you don't have actors who bring all of the fantastic expressions and bodily movements that a live human actor with their own creative brain can bring. So you really have to work with your animator like an actor to find those expressive moments for your character. And sometimes Aransta would even send me videos of herself like doing a movement the way that the character would do the movement. I would say, okay, yeah, that's what I'm imagining, or no, like let's have her hand a little bit lower here. Yeah, so it was definitely like piecing a puzzle together one piece at a time. And Aransta and I actually finally met in person for the first time at the premiere in Manchester. Was the first time that we met in person, and she's the best, and I love her.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear how you guys approached challenges. Okay, how you approach it, because independent filmmaking, there's not big wads of cash to throw at the problems. So it's really interesting to hear that. Were there any other kind of challenges that you guys had to approach creatively as well?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It is, I think, and I think a lot of filmmakers, I don't think I'm unique in saying this, but I think my version of the script that I first had some really big kind of like dramatic fantasy sequences. And obviously, when we got into actually animating that, and you're thinking about how many characters you're creating character design for, and in 2D animation, at least, every time you move the camera, you have to redraw the environment. So you want to be really specific with when you're moving the camera, when you're going to have to draw a new background. Um, and it definitely forced me to look at the script and go, okay, how much of this is necessary? I stripped back a lot of the flashback moments to make them much simpler, but I actually think it made the story much more impactful, because oftentimes when you really have to hone in and be specific about something, you cut to the quick of that emotional beat. I think a lot more. So I was really grateful actually for that limitation. I think, the other challenge is just when something takes 2.5 years, and you are, especially once we had finished, the way that we did it was I did the storyboard. It was around like 113 shots, I think, in terms of when we were redrawing new environments and or changing, close-ups. And then we made an animatic based on that um, storyboard. And then we gave the animatic to our composer, Taylor Mackle, who scored to the animatic. He wrote like 11 minutes of original music just looking at this very crude drawing of an animatic. And then once we had that score, we hired our assistant animators and we actually started the official animation set to the score so it could be in time the way that we were imagining it would be. And then later we hired our sound designers and stuff once the animation was closer to being finished. But in that process of, okay, we have the animatic, we're going to animation, we have the score, and I would start getting, Aronsta would send me keyframes of animation to approve at about every day or every other day, sometimes once a week. And that process took about a year and a half. And I think when you are getting 2 seconds, 3 seconds of animation at a time on an 11-minute journey, and that takes a year and a half, you really find yourself going, or I found myself at least, resisting the impulse to go, is there a way we can cut a corner here and just like get to the scene faster? This is taking so long. It was really a practice in patience and maintaining my faith in my original vision for the film, and believing that even though it felt so slow, that the pace, I wanted to honor the integrity of the original pace of the film, and I did. But I think that was a challenge I didn't expect, was how hard it is to continue to say I think this is a good idea for a year and a half, you know, 3 seconds at a time, and still fall in love with that project over and over again. Um, that was, yeah, a challenge I didn't expect.
Oh my goodness. Power to you guys. I'm really curious to know because it sounds like you guys were really passionate about the craft and to really tell this story of vibrancy and yourself leading. It's your first project, if I'm right. Is
It's the
that
first film I've directed, yeah.
is well, how do you know, for 2 years you guys are all working on this. Obviously maybe at different, segments at different times, maybe not all for 2 years, maybe for a month or 2 months. Well, how do you build a culture as a director so that everyone understands your vision of where you want vibrancy to go creatively, as production wise as well? What do you do?
That's such a good question. Like, what did I do? Um, uh, I think, you know, I felt very blessed to, even in my first conversation with Aransta, really feel that we understood each other. And I think that's why we agreed to work together so soon. We had very similar visual vocabularies. Some of our favorite films, you know, were like 101 Dalmatians, some of these like older Disney animated films. And um, I just felt like she got what I was trying to say and how I wanted to say it. And then also really brought, you know, I think I think something I love about film is that it's inherently collaborative. And even as a writer director, which is obviously, you know, you're sitting in a lot of the main seats of making something come to fruition in those positions. I think remembering that I've certainly felt like every day I learned so much from working with Aransta, eventually from working with 1000 Birds, the sound design team that we worked with, that really, I think, you know, yes, we had the score, but they brought all of the world to life, you know, with car sounds and door hinges and the sound of the wind. And each person on the team really brought an artistic expertise. So while I could say, you know, I'm maybe at the helm of this ship with a vision of this message of, you know, rediscovering joy after loss, and the way I've written the script is pretty specific, you know, in terms of visual beats, and then obviously the way I've compiled the storyboard. But then I think letting go of the reins a little bit and saying, you know what, I trust, based on our conversations, I trust the artistic people around me to help me see things that I might not imagine alone. And you know, that doesn't mean that there weren't always times that, you know, we would have one version and I would see it and I would go, okay, I think this actually isn't exactly what I'm imagining. You know, can we try it more like this, or can we try it in this color palette? But I feel like, yeah, I don't know, trust and communication. I think, you know, when people share a similar vision, and then feeling really open to what they bring to the project too, it makes it infinitely better.
So wonderful to hear that. You got a great care for your film, and you got a great care for your team,
I
and
love my
you.
team. They're the best.
it's, that's wonderful to hear. And your debut at Manchester Film Festival with your anime, how absolutely wonderful. And well, now that Manchester Film Festival, that was back in March, and now we're here in October, and you've been to a few more film festivals with Vibrancy, maybe, and obviously maybe a couple more on the way. Is that right? To hear maybe there's maybe more,
Maybe. The film
maybe.
festival world is so weird. I honestly have no idea.
That's very understandable. It's very true. But has there been any favorite festival experiences so far?
Gosh, well, you know, it's hard to, obviously Manchester was our premiere, and I had a wonderful trip around the UK before we ended up at Manchester with some other creative work projects that felt exciting. So I think that whole trip has a, you know, rose-colored hue over it for me. And also meeting Aransta in person. You know, she was able to come from Madrid to Manchester. We had 2 days in Manchester together, and that was, you know, nothing is going to beat that. I think when you work so closely with someone for so long over Zoom, I remember seeing her. We met up in a coffee shop the day before our screening, and I saw her and I went, we're the same height. Like, I had no idea. Um, and it was just a really a joyful, exciting experience. So that festival obviously stands out for a host of reasons. I think winning Best Animated Short at that festival was just the cherry on top of an otherwise incredible experience. Um, Other festivals that really stand out, we screened at Justine Bateman's festival, Credo 23, which is a film festival that it was its first year this year, but she founded it around the idea of films that didn't use any form of AI. I think Justine is very passionate about kind of keeping the human craft of filmmaking. And that obviously spoke to our idea with Vibrantea. Was a very human forward story, both in its theme and in how we accomplished it with our team of artists. So that was a really special festival to play at because it was funny. I went to pick up my filmmaker's badge. It's in Los Angeles. So it's special because I grew up in LA. It was fun to play in like a home festival. And I remember going to pick up my badge the day before my screening, and I wandered. I'm sure I wasn't like I went through the back of the building. I don't know. I thought I was turned around, and I ended up wandering into this conference room where Justine Bateman and the head of the festival and like all the other programmers were sitting. And I was like, "Is this where I get my badge?" And they said, "No, that's in the front of the building." But then they went, "Wait, what film do you have?" And I said, "Vibrantea." And their head of the festival said, "Oh my gosh, we loved your film so much. It moved us." He said, "The second we saw it, we said, this has to be in the festival." And this set the bar for how we looked at other animated shorts that were coming in. And it was so flattering, and also really just felt like such a kind of personal festival experience that they really knew who each of their filmmakers were based on their name. They knew what film they'd made. They had really complimentary things to say. That was a really lovely experience, and lovely to have that be in my hometown. Um, and then I think I'd also have to mention our final festival, the Vashon Island Film Festival. We just screened there about a month ago. And for those of you who don't know, Vashon Island is this little island off of the coast of Seattle that I love and have loved just as a human traveling, as a writer who likes to go places and kind of have a respite from being in the city. And when I found out that they had a film festival and then that Vibrantea was going to be able to play there, that felt really, really special. Mark Sayer, who runs their festival, is a lovely human being. And I think that festival was really special because I just honestly, the shorts that they programmed in their animation block were incredible. So incredible. I was sitting there going, I'm honored to even be amongst these other shorts. And I think, maybe that's the joy of going to film festivals in the first place, is seeing other artists who really inspire you. I had one film that really stood out to me from that festival that I hadn't seen before, and I don't think it's out yet, but if there's a way to watch it, was John Kelly's film Retirement Plan. I may be getting this wrong. I think he's either a British or an Irish filmmaker. The main character is voiced by Domhnall Gleeson, who I love. I think he's an incredible actor. I've been a fan for a long time, and I recognized his voice immediately. But and that was the first short that screened in the top of the animation block. And I laughed and cried over the span of the short film. And I just thought, wow, it is a true honor to have my short play in the same block as this. And that was a really special experience.
Ah, so wonderful. And it's so interesting to hear about the reactions from the festival side. I'm really curious to know, now that you've been around there and you've gone and you've seen your film up on the big screen, you no doubt probably didn't have your eyes on the screen. Maybe you were looking around at the audience and seeing how they were reacting. Did you notice any audience reactions that surprised you while touring?
I'm surprised whenever anyone likes it. I mean, I I know I like it, but I think especially animation filmmaking can be very insular. So you hope that other people get the vision that you and your team had and set out to make. And I think when anyone does, it feels like this fantastic relief and point of connection. Um, Gosh, I'm trying to think of in terms of specific moments. Yeah, I had actually at the Credo 23 Film Festival, I had a man come up to me after my short screened, and he was a makeup artist who'd worked in Hollywood for a long time and said, he always looks for film festivals that are playing. And he said that he cried during the film. Because it just really spoke to his experience in the arts and experience, rediscovering wonder at a time in the world that can feel really dark and really pessimistic right now. And I think feedback like that, especially from people who, that he also, like you and like me, did not like grow up as a dancer, it really kind of like transcended the actual minutia of this, my character's lived experience, and I spoke to him on a broader theme of, as an artist in the world, how do you push against, loss and sadness, and stay present and love what you're doing. And I think to see people who maybe aren't like the target demographic, in the sense that maybe they're not like young women who look like our protagonist, but they really still connect with the story. That's felt really special, and I don't want to say surprising, because I think the film has a wide reach, but maybe a little surprising.
That's so lovely to hear. And the beauty of film festivals for filmmakers are twofold. You've got the general public who come there to enjoy the love of movies and to find new films, but it's also an opportunity for filmmakers to find other filmmakers, to have a chit chat, maybe not to do a co-production or anything as big as that, but maybe just to go, oh, should we add each other on LinkedIn or Instagram, so on and so forth. Could you share any lessons you may have learned about connecting and networking at film festivals?
Lessons, I mean, do it. um, connect, connect with people you admire. I think, I don't know. I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I think sometimes, we can be shy as people and as artists. And I think a film festival is a time to not be shy. We're all there for the same reason. So I think if you see someone's film that you admire, go up to them. Or if they're not at the festival, find them and badger them into being your friend. No, uh, no, don't harass anybody. But I did have that experience actually in Manchester. There was a really, really great stop motion film. I love stop motion, and by Sean Pecknold. He wrote and directed it. It was called Tennis Oranges. And this was not it had already won actually quite a few festivals like South by Southwest, and I think it premiered at TIFF, but it was maybe in its second year of playing in film festivals, and it happened to be programmed at Manchester. And I watched it, played actually right before mine. We were programmed next to each other, and I was watching it, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I think this is set in an imagined version of Chinatown in Los Angeles, which is right close to where I live." Um, and I really recognized like specific streets and landmarks, and I loved it so much. I was blown away. I mean, he's an incredible filmmaker, and I found him on Instagram, and I saw that my composer actually followed him, and we had a lot of mutual friends in the music world. I later found out Robin Pecknold from Fleet Foxes is Sean's brother, so it made sense that there was a lot of music connections. But I followed him, and I reached out to him, and I said, I saw your film and I loved it so much. Um, and he followed me back and got back to me, and we DM'd back and forth a little bit, and then we're like, oh, maybe we should get coffee. And as happens oftentimes, you say that, and then it is the classic running joke that you don't end up ever getting coffee. But then months later, this was just a couple of months ago, I had Vibrantea play at just like a friends and family in-house screening at the new Big Beach production company offices. They were kind of christening their new offices, and they have a screening room, and they were playing a few different shorts, and my friend asked if mine would play there. And so I played it, and I really connected with one of the heads of the company at Big Beach, and he really loved the short. And we were talking about animation, and he said, oh, we're actually working on our first animated feature right now with this really great director, Sean Pecknold. And I said, from Tennis Oranges. And he was like, wait, what? You know that short? And I said, yes, our shorts played together. And so now we're all in Los Angeles, and I'm secretly angling to hope to maybe get to assist somehow on that feature. But it was a really fun kind of full circle moment of you never know when someone whose art speaks to you will come back up in your life in another context. And so, take advantage of the ability to reach out to them when you can, even if you feel a little shy or awkward. You know, I emailed John Kelly and told him how much I loved Retirement Plan, and I still haven't heard back, but I told him it was great.
It's so true, though, what you're saying about it may not be an instantaneous connection and, a project gets working or whatever. It might be in a few years, it might be even 10 years, you never know. Career is a long period of time. It isn't just about the current film, it's about the career as a whole. And I think maybe a lot of filmmakers do fall into that trap where they have to try and compress as much sort of results into such a short time when, in fact, we're in this for a long time. We're artists after all, and we're all part of a process. Also, it might not be the right time. That's also another thing. Emerson, I'm interested to know, like, what have you got planned for the future? Because you've done Vibrantea, you're hungry, you want to keep being an artist. So what's going on? What's the next few years looking like for you? What can you share?
Yeah. Well, I have to say I'm really lucky to be working on a project that I love right now. That is still in the animation space, but it's a feature, and I'm not directing it, I'm writing it. But I'm working with a very acclaimed director who we've not been able to announce the film publicly yet, but they are someone whose work I have admired for the majority of my life. And so, like, really deeply admired. And so to get to work with them and to write a script for them to direct, that's an animated feature, has just been a dream come true and continues to be a dream continuing to come true over and over again. Obviously, animation takes a really long time. And so we're still in early phases of this project, but I I have been working on that. That's been taking up a lot of my last couple of months and through the summer. And obviously will be a long road, and I'm hoping to get to shadow the director potentially and see how much I can learn from the journey of bringing that film into fruition. And so that's something that I'm really excited about. And I'm sorry to be cryptic about it, but it will be excited to talk about it more when I can. I certainly will be announcing that. And then in terms of, I'm looking a lot at kind of working on the live action side of things too. I have a couple live action comedy scripts that I'm taking around and in conversations with a couple different producers about. And then on the animation side, additionally, I'm pitching two concepts right now. Um, One is a concept that I have honestly wanted to write for a really long time. And like you say, sometimes the timing, you have the idea is right, but the timing isn't right. And I have faith that with this current project I'm pitching that I have been developing for quite a few years, I think it may have found its people, knock on wood, that the time feels right to bring that story to fruition. And it's something I've been passionate about for a while. And then I'm working on something I'm so excited about. Talk about collaboration. A great friend of mine, Annika Bennett, who is an amazing songwriter and a solo artist herself, but she's written for a lot of pretty acclaimed pop artists. Her and I are working together on an original animated musical feature right now that she actually approached me with an idea for, inspired by a song that she wrote that John Mayer produced. And the theme of that song is kind of this question of internal versus external validation. And in a world where there's a lot of conversations around perception and fame and virality in terms of, online and social media, like how do we find our own internal validation, and is it really so important to have the eyes of the world on you? So she came to me with this loose concept, and I loved the song and I love her. I mean, she's been a friend for many years, and I have always hoped that there would be something for us to do together, but I never knew quite what that was. And then we started working on this, and we've developed a very full pitch. I'm writing the story, she's obviously doing the music. We have about 3 original demos done so far, and we're in the process of pitching that movie right now. And I feel like we've seen a lot of original musical, not a lot, but we've seen some original musicals have a lot of success recently with K-pop Demon Hunters, which I was a big fan of. And so it feels really exciting to have a project. Writing can be such a solitary endeavor, and most of my pitches I write alone. I pretty much develop alone. But to work with a really incredible artist like Annika, and I feel like every time we talk, we come out more inspired for this project. So, obviously all long roads, but I'm hoping to bring some animated music into the world in a positive way, hopefully soon.
Wonderful. Vibrantea is it's your first and so far the only project, but I think it's a great taste of where you're going with your artistry, and it's a very beautiful short film, and I recommend it when it does go live that people do check it out, because it is a very beautiful short film. It's a very enjoyable watch. As you say, there's no characters that talk, but the imagery just speaks for itself. It's very wonderful, and I look forward to your next pieces of work to come out. So where can people check you out?
Yes. Well, you can check me out on Instagram is kind of the main place where I would post updates. I'm not super active. I've actually tried to take it off of my phone so I can be invested in living in the real world and not the digital sphere as much. But I do post on Instagram when there is big, exciting news to share, such as Vibrantea coming out publicly, such as this podcast, such as the feature I'm working on right now. When I can announce that, I certainly will be doing that on Instagram. And that's just I am Emerson Tenney is my Instagram handle. I also have an Instagram specifically for Vibrantea that is linked there as well. That's kind of the main place to find me, in these crazy digital times.
Wonderful. And also, if people are interested, maybe distributors, they can definitely check you out on Plusreel to see Vibrantea, and also to get in touch with you as well, and also see your
Yes.
venture that will come out soon enough.
Yes, please. Absolutely.
So Emerson, an absolute pleasure having you on. It's absolutely great to catch up with you. When I first started talking to you in March, early in the year, and you were talking about the plans that you had for Vibrantea out on the festival circuit, and now that I'm talking to you at the end of it, it's absolutely wonderful to hear it, and I'm so happy for you as a filmmaker's filmmaker. It's just absolutely beautiful, because making the film is one battle, getting it out there is another, and I'm so proud for you. So absolutely amazing that it's coming off super well, and it's soon to come out online for others to enjoy on a even bigger scale. So absolutely wonderful.
Aww.
So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And then just thank you for doing this podcast in the first place, and for creating a platform where filmmakers can have their work seen and celebrated, because I think that's really important, and I'm honored to be included. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Emerson. Well, I'll let you enjoy your lovely LA day while the sun is setting here over on the pond. Okay. Cheers.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.